There comes a moment in every powerful man's life when something within him dies and something greater is born. It's the moment he stops expecting the world to care. He no longer seeks sympathy, no longer waits for someone to understand his pain, validate his struggle, or reward his virtue. In that instant, he sees the world as it truly is, indifferent, ruthless, self-serving, and instead of breaking, he hardens. He becomes untouchable, because once you accept that no one cares, you are free, free to act without approval, free to move without applause, free to suffer without resentment, and that is when true transformation begins. Machiavelli never preached fairness. He preached reality, and reality is simple. People care only when it benefits them. They care when your pain entertains them, when your success lifts them, when your failure reassures them, but they do not care for you. If you build your life expecting otherwise, you are building on sand, and when it collapses, the crowd will step over your ruins without slowing down. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you can build something indestructible, a life not dependent on being cared for, but on being feared, respected, or needed. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. Believing people should care about you simply because you suffer is a child's dream. Power begins the day you bury that dream, when you realize your pain is yours to carry, and no one is coming to take it away. Everything shifts. You stop asking, "Why won't anyone help me?" and start asking, "What can I build in this silence?" You stop broadcasting your wounds. You become the kind of man whose silence itself unsettles the room, that silence becomes a fortress. This is the root of Stoic power, to suffer without theatrics, endure without applause, bleed without an audience. Most people, even the strong, are addicted to emotional display. They package their pain in poetry, complain in the name of honesty, fish for pity, dressed as truth. But the Machiavellian mind knows every public wound is a transaction. Keep selling your suffering, and you cheapen yourself. Show it enough, and people stop seeing strength. They see weakness dressed as performance, and in that moment, your power dies. This doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you reveal nothing, unless it serves your strategy. The world rewards strength, not need, and the fastest path to strength is to act as though no one cares, even if deep inside you still wish they did. Because when you act like no one cares, you stop waiting, you stop postponing your evolution, you stop leaning on invisible support, and start training to walk through fire alone. That man doesn't crave applause, pity, or recognition. He becomes a force, and the moment he enters a room, others feel it. Ironically, this is when power becomes magnetic. The moment you stop caring whether people care, they start to notice you. The moment you stop needing to be understood, you become fascinating. The moment you stop begging for loyalty, others chase your approval, because true indifference, earned, unshakable indifference, is rare. Most men fake it, simmering with hidden resentment. The Machiavellian man feels none, not because he is broken, but because he understands the game, and those who are still waiting to be loved for free feel that difference. It unsettles them, and whatever unsettles others commands them. Think of how many people operate. They shape their identity around being liked. They say what sounds good. They post their struggles in hopes someone will comment, "You're strong." They share quotes about resilience, but melt under pressure. They want the appearance of toughness, but the safety of sympathy. That's not strength, that's decoration. True resilience is invisible. It is the man who walks past you with heavy scars and no need to explain them. It is the man who doesn't share his pain, because his pain is his weapon. That is the man people begin to fear, then follow. Machiavelli would say, stop advertising your hardship. Use it. Every time you're tempted to complain, pause and remember, no one cares. Not deeply, not consistently, and that is not a tragedy. It is liberation. Because once you accept this, you begin to move differently. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to justify your existence. You stop asking for forgiveness simply for being ambitious, aggressive, or unapologetically focused. You realize that caring too much about being cared for is the softest form of slavery, and freedom begins when you let it go. Here is where the Stoic merges with the strategist. When no one cares, your losses become private, your growth becomes secret, your ambition becomes surgical. You build in silence, you endure in silence, and then one day you emerge, and no one knows how you got there. Because while they were watching the loud and needy crumble under the weight of ignored expectations, you were becoming a ghost that moves through fire untouched. You didn't need applause, you didn't need pity, you didn't even need company. You needed the silence, because the silence taught you the truth. Power belongs to the man who doesn't beg for care. But this shift is not easy. You will be tempted to reach out, to explain, to seek connection. You will have moments of doubt, moments where your silence feels like suffocation. Good. That means the old part of you is dying. Let it die. Let the part of you that needs to be seen wither. Let the part that rages when ignored fall silent, because underneath that noise is something terrifyingly powerful. The man who moves for himself. The man who rises not because someone lifted him, but because he dragged himself up by sheer force of will. That is the man people remember, not the one who cried the loudest, the one who didn't flinch. You see, the world doesn't care about your suffering, but it will care about what you become because of it. If you use that truth as a reason to collapse, you will become just another echo in a crowd of complaints. But if you use it as a reason to harden, to sharpen, to rise in silence, then you become the kind of figure Machiavelli admired, untouchable, unpredictable, and unforgettable. And here's the paradox. When you no longer seek care, when you stop needing to be understood or helped or held, you gain influence. People want to be near you. They sense something they don't have, internal authority, the quietness of a man who is not waiting for the world to catch up, the stability of someone who has already buried his need for sympathy. That kind of presence changes rooms. It shifts dynamics. It makes the weak imitate you, even if they don't understand what they're imitating. This is why Machiavelli wrote for those who sought power, not pity, because pity ends when the mood changes. But power, real, silent, indifferent power, stays. When you accept no one cares, you no longer depend on the emotional weather of others. You stop asking for shelter and build a kingdom out of stone. And from that kingdom, you look out not with hatred, but with clarity. You do not need revenge on those who ignored you. You thank them because their silence helped you find yours, and in your silence, you found yourself. Once you've crossed that invisible line, once you've truly accepted that no one cares, you enter a state few ever reach. The world becomes quieter, not because there's less noise, but because you've stopped listening for applause. You've stopped scanning faces for signs of understanding. You've stopped editing your behavior to win affection. And in that silence, you begin to hear something else. Your own mind, unfiltered, unchained, and sharper than it has ever been, because you're no longer performing, you're building. This is when the transformation becomes irreversible. You stop waking up with the question, will they care today? Instead, you wake up with one question, what must be done? You begin to treat your suffering the way a sculptor treats stone, not something to be shown, but something to be carved. Every betrayal, every failure, every moment of invisibility becomes material. You don't cry over it, you chisel it, because the man who accepts that no one cares stops wishing for a better world and starts forging one in his image. And here's the part most people will never understand. Once you stop needing the world, you start commanding it. That sounds paradoxical, but it's brutally real. Dependence repels power. Independence attracts it. When people sense that you are emotionally self-sufficient, they shift, their tone changes, their posture adjusts. They begin to measure their words around you, not because you're loud, but because your silence isn't desperate. It's composed, it's dangerous. It means you are not bargaining for approval. It means you're operating on your own terms. And people fear those terms, even if they admire them. Look at the strongest figures in history, whether rulers, thinkers, warriors, or builders. The common thread wasn't that they were loved, it's that they didn't need to be. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while losing children, enduring illness, and facing betrayals that would have broken most men. Did he collapse into public despair? Did he campaign for sympathy? No. He wrote to himself in silence. He reminded himself daily, no one is coming to save you. Be your own fortress. That is Stoic reality, and it is Machiavellian too, not because it is cold, but because it is effective. Niccolò Machiavelli knew that a man who expects care from the masses is already conquered. Why? Because the masses are fickle. Today they chant your name, tomorrow they demand your head. If your power depends on their affection, then your power is borrowed. But if your power comes from your indifference to their affection, if you lead whether they cheer or jeer, then you are untouchable. And that's the only kind of power worth having. Not popularity, not applause, not validation, command. So when you feel abandoned, ignored, or misunderstood, you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to resentment, the other leads to greatness. Most choose resentment. They sulk, they retreat, they become bitter that the world isn't fair, that no one saw their value. They waste years in that fog, but the Machiavellian path is different. You see the same truth that no one cares, and instead of mourning it, you make it your foundation. You stop expecting the world to be fair. You start becoming something that cannot be ignored. That shift begins with how you speak. Weak men complain about being overlooked. Strong men let results speak for them. You will never hear the powerful explain themselves unnecessarily. Why? Because they understand that attention given too freely is charity, and charity cheapens value. If someone doesn't recognize your worth, you do not convince them. You make yourself so rare, so effective, so dominant in your lane that they are forced to notice, not because you asked for it, but because their survival now depends on your presence. That is the difference between a man who begs for care and a man who commands consequence. When you stop expecting care, you stop giving out pieces of yourself for free. You stop bleeding emotionally into every room you enter. You stop announcing your wounds, hoping someone will rescue you, and instead, you begin to weaponize your pain. You turn heartbreak into discipline. You turn rejection into direction. You turn being ignored into becoming undeniable. Because once you realize that no one is coming, you become the one who arrives. People will sense this shift, and it will make them uncomfortable, not because you're aggressive, but because you're complete. Most people are walking open wounds, constantly leaking emotions and seeking someone to patch them up. When they meet someone who doesn't leak, who doesn't beg, who doesn't explain, they're thrown off. You are not like them. You are not here to be saved. You are here to take what you came for. That energy, that cold clarity, is what makes you powerful. It's the same clarity that builds empires, the same clarity that outlasts betrayal, the same clarity that doesn't blink when old allies turn cold. Because when you've accepted that care is not guaranteed, you stop measuring people by how they make you feel and start measuring them by how they move when no one's watching. That's where loyalty reveals itself. That's where strategy begins. You start seeing who deserves a seat at your table, not based on how they treat you when you're shining, but based on how they act when you're silent, when you've gone dark, when you've stopped giving. And that's another part of the Stoic Machiavellian shift. You become more selective. You stop chasing connection. You start observing behavior. You watch who checks in when there's nothing in it for them. You watch who disappears when you stop performing. You notice who speaks your name only when it's trending and who still speaks it when it's whispered. You file it all away, not for revenge, but for clarity, because power is not just about rising. It's about knowing who can stand beside you without dragging you down, and that knowledge only comes when you stop needing everyone to care. Eventually your identity changes. You are no longer the one who was hurt or the one who was overlooked. That story dies. You become the one who made it anyway, and that story rewrites everything. It gives your past meaning, it gives your pain a purpose, and it gives your enemies a problem they can't solve. Because you didn't need a savior, you became something far more dangerous. A man who moves forward without applause, without permission, without needing to be understood. That's what scares them the most. Because most people believe they're strong until no one claps, until no one checks in, until the room goes silent, then they shrink. But the one who thrives in that silence, the one who keeps going, not despite the indifference, but because of it, that man becomes myth. He becomes the story whispered in corners. How did he survive that? How did he rise from that? Why didn't he break? And the answer is always the same, because he stopped expecting anyone to care. And from that moment forward, he never waited again. He didn't become cold. He became calculated. He didn't become bitter. He became better. He didn't stop feeling. He stopped needing. And that shift turned him into a threat. Because when a man no longer seeks care, he stops being a burden. He stops being predictable. He stops being controlled. He becomes the one who others depend on, and the one who can walk away from anything without begging. That is when you win quietly, permanently, irreversibly, and all it takes is accepting that no one owes you a single drop of care, not the world, not your friends, not even fate. You either build yourself from nothing, or let the silence bury you. And for the Machiavellian mind, there's only ever one choice. At this stage, something fundamental happens inside you. The craving for validation is replaced with the hunger for control. You're no longer in the business of being seen. You're in the business of becoming undeniable, and not in the loud, theatrical way people try to force attention, but in the quiet, strategic way Machiavelli understood best. When you stop expecting anyone to care, you stop playing by their emotional rules, you stop asking permission to exist, and instead you start reshaping reality around your movement. One decision at a time, one silence at a time, one refusal to flinch at a time. You become a sovereign territory, no longer emotionally colonized by others, no longer waiting for the external world to assign value to you. You define your own value, not because it feels good, but because it's the only way to survive with power. This shift turns your psychology into a fortress. You don't just become harder to manipulate, you become impossible to move unless you've already decided to move. People don't understand how rare that is. Most walk around governed by unseen forces, the need to be loved, the fear of being abandoned, the aching hope that someone will finally notice them, and these invisible strings tug on every choice they make. It's why they fold under pressure. It's why they betray their purpose for short-term affection. It's why they become pawns in games they don't even realize they're playing. But when you've accepted deeply without illusion that no one cares, you cut those strings. You act without needing applause. You walk away without needing closure. You work in silence and expect nothing in return but your own satisfaction. And that kind of psychological sovereignty terrifies people, because it means they can't guilt you, they can't tempt you, they can't threaten you with withdrawal of love, attention, or support, because you've already buried the part of you that depended on those things. Now your movements become leaner, cleaner, no more wasted effort, explaining yourself to those who don't listen, no more exhausting emotional transactions with people who will never understand what drives you, no more begging for trust. You don't ask for trust, you prove yourself, and those who don't see it are left behind. This is not cruelty, it's precision, strategic abandonment of all dead weight, because now your mission matters more than your feelings, and that's a critical turn in your journey. Your purpose stops being emotional, it becomes strategic. You don't work just to be fulfilled, you work to conquer. You don't improve just to feel better, you improve to dominate. You don't rise just to be admired, you rise to become essential. That mindset is the difference between the weak and the world shaping. The weak want to be held, the powerful want to be irreplaceable. And when no one cares, the only path forward is to make yourself so competent, so unshakable, so dangerous to ignore, that even the indifferent must adjust themselves around your presence. You stop living for sympathy. You start living for leverage. And here's the most twisted, powerful part of it all. Once you no longer need people to care about you, people start to care, not because they've changed, but because you have. Your detachment becomes gravity. Your silence becomes status. Your refusal to chase makes others chase, because most people are repelled by neediness, but drawn to indifference. especially when that indifference is earned, not faked. And make no mistake, there is a difference. Fake indifference is loud. It tries too hard. It pretends not to care, while constantly peeking to see if anyone noticed. Real indifference is invisible. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't signal. It just moves forward with or without the audience. And when you carry yourself like that, people start to wonder, what does he know that I don't? Why is he so sure of himself? What did he go through to become like this? They sense that you've seen things, that you've suffered in silence, that you've learned to walk through hell without writing poetry about the flames, and whether they love you or fear you, they cannot ignore you. That is the exact power Machiavelli respected, the kind that doesn't ask for a throne, but makes people nervous when you enter the room because they feel they might be in the presence of something unbreakable. That's what no one cares really unlocks. Not bitterness, but backbone. You stop crying over what people fail to give you and start weaponizing what they never could take from you, your dignity, your focus, your momentum. And once those things belong only to you, your power compounds quietly, daily, relentlessly. You stop talking about your moves. You start making them. You stop explaining your standards. You start enforcing them. You stop waiting for the right moment. You become the moment. And still no one will clap. Not at first. Not when you need it. But now that doesn't matter. You've built your machinery without applause. You've suffered without sympathy. And that makes you terrifyingly efficient. Because the ones who succeed without support are the ones who never fall apart when the support vanishes later. That's the secret no one talks about. The world gives applause only after you've proven you no longer need it. And the people who never stopped depending on it, they're the ones who collapse the moment the cheers go silent. You won't. You've already lived in silence. You've built in shadows. You've starved your need to be loved. And in that starvation you found your power. So now, when the world finally turns to you, when they finally ask how you survived, you won't need to explain. They'll see it in your eyes. The quiet storm, the refusal to die, the calm that only comes from walking through the fire alone, because the truth is simple. Once you accept no one cares, you stop needing rescue. You become the storm they thought would break you. And now, you are the one that breaks them. By the time you've reached this level of detachment, you're no longer driven by hope. You're driven by inevitability. You don't hope to be seen. You don't hope to be loved. You don't hope to be chosen. All of that was burned out of you in the furnace of silence. And what emerged wasn't a man hoping to be part of the world. It was a man building one in his image. A man who doesn't flinch when he's alone because he's walked so long without applause that now the silence sounds like home. This is where the Machiavellian mind eclipses the emotional mind completely. Most people are still negotiating with reality. They're trying to get the world to care, trying to get life to reward them for being good, being kind, being loyal. But the world doesn't reward emotion, it rewards effectiveness. And when you finally abandon the delusion that being cared for is a guarantee, you stop negotiating, you start operating. It's a different energy entirely. Now your actions don't wobble under pressure. Now your ambition doesn't bend to loneliness. Now your path isn't altered by rejection. You are no longer playing a game with others. You are building a game that others are forced to play. And the fewer people you expect to care, the more dangerous you become, because now you're not slowed down by the emotional bureaucracy that governs most lives. You don't stop to explain. You don't pause to reassure. You don't hold hands through their discomfort. You move, and the world is either forced to catch up or collapse in your absence. You become what they call emotionless, but it's not emotionlessness. It's refinement, precision. You still feel, but you feel in solitude, and you use those feelings not to complain, but to engineer, to plan, to punish, to build something no one can take from you again, because you've learned the most brutal, beautiful truth Machiavelli ever hinted at. You cannot make people care. You can only make them comply. The true divide isn't between good and evil. It's between the weak and the powerful. The weak crave emotional justice. The powerful demand results. The sooner you understand that emotional justice is a myth, the sooner you gain real control. Not everyone will support you, not everyone will understand, not everyone will care. So what? What does their care build? What does their sympathy save when you're bleeding alone at the peak? Nothing. It sounds harsh, because it is harsh, but harshness isn't cruelty, it's truth. The world doesn't run on feelings, it runs on power, and the first form of power is mastery of the mind. Once you accept that care is a currency no one is obligated to spend on you, you stop begging for it. You build wealth in other ways: quiet power, ruthless patience, relentless discipline, and above all, emotional solitude. Solitude becomes your forge, your compass, your sanctuary. In that silence, you're no longer enslaved by the need to be seen, and finally, you see. You see who uses you, who tests you, who claps, only when others clap first. That vision, that clarity, is the blade Machiavelli was sharpening all along. Once you accept no one cares, you stop worshipping loyalty from strangers, you stop calling silence betrayal, you stop waiting for hands that will never reach out. Instead, you turn inward, not to hide, but to sharpen. And from that sharpening comes something unexpected: dominance. Because when the crowd sees the man who doesn't set to flinch, doesn't set to explain, doesn't set depend, they start to orbit. They lean in, they whisper your name. He never begged, he never complained, he never crumbled. By then, you no longer need their care. You already built without it. You already bled without it. You already became everything you needed in the dark. This is the Machiavellian truth. People only care once you've proven you don't need them, and even then, their care is a byproduct, never a necessity. You move with or without it. You win with or without it. You survive with or without it. And once people realize you've made peace with being alone, they stop seeing you as vulnerable, they start seeing you as inevitable. And in this world, inevitable is the only identity that matters. So when someone ignores you, it doesn't shake you, it reveals them. When support is withdrawn, it doesn't break you, it shows their limits. When silence is used as punishment, you welcome it, because silence is where you live. This is how you break emotional slavery. You stop reading apathy as loss, and start reading it as training. Every absence sharpens you. Every silence arms you. Every abandonment forces you deeper into the one voice that matters: your own. And now, you don't flinch. You don't ask. You don't explain. You enforce. Your boundaries are law. Your standards are iron. Your movement is silent. The ones who didn't care will soon realize they've lost access to the man who doesn't need them, and by the time they care, it's already too late. Because when you stop waiting, you become the one they wait for, and that is the ultimate power.